What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Lions video. Now, yesterday we broke into the undrafted free agent section of the Detroit Lions team building process. We talked about one of the Detroit Lions' earliest and highest priority UDFAs in wide receiver Sage Surratt. We talked about his strengths, we talked about his weaknesses, what we could potentially see from him in his rookie season, and the role that he is going to be competing for come training camp and come the preseason. However, in that video, I also mentioned another undrafted wide receiver, a guy with similar size, similar skill sets, and a guy that could eventually end up beating out Sage Surratt for that last wide receiver spot in that big body jump ball red zone wide receiver role. Now, this guy is, of course, Jonathan Adams Jr., wide receiver from Arkansas State. Now, before we get into Jonathan Adams Jr., before we get into his strengths and weaknesses, the potential role we could see from him, and whether or not he may actually end up beating Sage Surratt for that last wide receiver role on the team. Before we get into it, if you're new to the channel and you're enjoying the content, please consider liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. It takes just 2 seconds out of you to do so. It's quick, free, and easy, and you'd be helping the channel out more than you could possibly know. So if you could do that, take those 2 seconds to like and subscribe. I'd be greatly appreciative for it. However, with all that being said, and without any further ado, let's get into talking about Jonathan Adams Jr., the wide receiver from Arkansas State. Now, Jonathan Adams Jr., very similarly to Sage Surratt, stands at 6'3" and weighs upwards of 220 pounds. Now, he did end up playing 4 years at Arkansas State, where he played in 40 games, totaling 166 receptions for 2,306 yards and 21 touchdowns. Now, in 2020, the unfortunate season of just cancellations and uncertainty, he played in 10 games for Arkansas State, having 77 receptions for 1,111 yards and 12 touchdowns. Now, of course, some people are going to point to that and say, yeah, but he did it in the Sun Belt. Yeah, but he did it against worser competition. I don't care about the competition. I mean, yeah, he didn't play against the greatest secondaries, but he didn't have a great quarterback throwing to him either. The competition around him, his teammates, their level of play was not necessarily the greatest either. So to make the argument that he played at a lower competition is fair, but I don't think it's something that you can hold too highly against him. It's kind of like the Trey Lance situation, right? Where, yeah, he played against lower competition, but the talent around him was also not as high. So how much are you really going to knock the kid for not playing at the highest level of competition? Now, I say that, and I say that Jonathan Adams did not play at a super high level at Arkansas State. However, he did play one Pac-12 team, did play one Power 5 team in his time at Arkansas State in Kansas State, in which he put up 8 receptions for 98 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, just like Sage Surratt, Jonathan Adams is a contested catch monster. His game is jumping up, high pointing the football, being an absolute beast in the air, being an absolute monster as contested catch, and using his size, using his weight, and using his strength to box out defensive backs to the football. Now, Jonathan Adams, of course, being that skill set and having that ability, does have really, really good hands. You do not see a lot of drops out of him, and in fact, I think he has a higher potential than Sage Surratt. From what I've seen from him, from the highs and from the ceilings and the potential that I see from both wide receivers, I do think that Jonathan Adams is better at getting up. I think he gets a little bit higher. I think he's a little bit better at high pointing the ball, and I do think he has a little bit stronger hands than Sage Surratt. Now, to me, I believe that Jonathan Adams can be our next Kenny Golladay. He can be that underrated guy coming into training camp, a big body jump ball wide receiver that just is going to go up and be a security blanket for Jared Goff. The Lions, of course, let Kenny Golladay walk this offseason because they did not feel it was necessary, or they did not feel like it was a good idea to pay the star wide receiver 12 or 18 to 19 million dollars a season. And I agree with that move. I love Kenny Golladay. If they could have brought him back for much cheaper, I would have loved to see it, but reality says that is not the case. And the Lions, I believe, actually found a replacement for Kenny Golladay. Now, of course, Jonathan Adams is not going to step in right away and be a true number one alpha wide receiver like Kenny Golladay was. However, I think the potential and I think the developmental I think the development is there to have him produce and have him become a wide receiver just like Kenny Golladay did a few seasons ago. Now, just like Sage Surratt, I see Jonathan Adams competing for that red zone, jump ball, big body, box out wide receiver in the red zone. A guy that if you're not getting separation, if they're stacking the box and it's one-on-one coverage on the outside, you just have Jared Goff take the snap, take a quick peek, lob it up, and just let Jonathan Adams go do his thing and moss the defensive backs. I can see him getting a couple of touchdowns this season. I don't see him being a number one wide receiver anytime soon. I really don't see Jonathan Adams being a full-time starting boundary wide receiver for the Detroit Lions now, and maybe not ever. However, I do think the potential is there. I do think the skill set is there, and I do think the fact that they are trying to replace and get another big body guy in the building is something that we should look forward to as Lions fans. We talked about this yesterday as well, but you look at the Lions wide receiver moves this offseason, you look at what they've done, you look at the way that they're trying to construct the roster, they prioritize speed, they prioritize separation, and not so much hands or jump ball ability. Tyrell Williams is big, strong, and fast, but I wouldn't say he's the greatest contested catch wide receiver. Brashad Perryman is really big and really fast, but he does not have the greatest hands. Same thing with Damian Bradley or, any of the other wide receivers we brought in. We don't have that big body, jump ball, sure-handed security blanket wide receiver on the roster until we signed these two guys out of undrafted free agency. Now, again, just like Sage Surratt, I think the worst case scenario for Jonathan Adams is going to be a practice squad player and a developmental guy for the future. I'm not going to guarantee that he makes the roster year one. I'm not going to guarantee that he's going to get that last roster spot for the Detroit Lions, but what I am going to say is I don't see a way that he gets straight up cut. I don't see a way in which Jonathan Adams does not in some way wear a Detroit Lions uniform this season. He is simply too talented not to be here on the roster and simply has a skill set that until either him or Sage Surratt wins the job, the Lions don't have a clear answer for that big body red zone wide receiver yet. Again, I think Jonathan Adams probably should have been drafted. His production tells you he should have been drafted. His size tells you he should have been drafted. His highlights, his ceiling tells you exactly what you could potentially be getting in the Arkansas State product. And yet, just like Sage Surratt, just like some of the other players in this class that were projected to go earlier, Sage Surratt fell out of the 259 picks and became a priority undrafted free agent. Now, for the Detroit Lions not addressing wide receiver a ton in the draft, as I said, they only addressed it one time. They only got Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round of the NFL draft, and that was the only way they addressed wide receiver in the draft class, and that's the only rookie wide receiver that they ended up bringing in. However, it does make a lot more sense now as they brought in two, and actually they brought in a third wide receiver that I believe could all compete for roster spots, and at the end of the day, could all compete for playing time in the 2021 season. And in the undrafted free agency, what else could you ask for? And as an undrafted free agent, what else can you ask out of your UDFA class other than just be here and compete? Be here and have an opportunity and show us that you are willing and you are deserving of a role on this roster. I think you can see any of these three wide receivers we picked up in undrafted free agency push for a spot on the roster. I think all three of them make the team. I think both Sage Surratt and Jonathan Adams are going to push for a roster spot, and whichever one doesn't end up winning the job outright is going to be placed on the practice squad and is going to be a guy that is protected, is going to be a guy for our new wide receivers coach in Antwaan Randle El to develop over the next couple of seasons. And with that being said, I could not be more excited for it. Wide receiver was a huge need for the Detroit Lions. The Lions were a wide receiver needy team, and a lot of people thought they would address it with the 7th overall pick. A lot of people even had the Detroit Lions going back-to-back wide receivers in the 1st and 2nd rounds. Of course, that did not happen. The Lions decided to go a different way. They decided to go a different route in the NFL draft. However, with that being the case, the Lions still ended up with very good wide receiver value. They still ended up with 3 wide receivers, 1 in the 4th round and 2 in undrafted free agency that I truly believe could make the roster in 2021. Guys that obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be a player that likely starts for the Detroit Lions wide receiver core, but even then, 2 other guys, 2 big body, jump ball, Kenny Golladay, Mike Williams type guys that do have a place in the NFL, guys that do have a spot on NFL rosters, and players that are going to compete for playing time and for a roster spot. Now, with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching the video. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think about Jonathan Adams Jr.? Do you think he's going to make the team? Do you think he'll beat out Sage Surratt? If he does make the team, what role do you see for him in 2021? And what role do you see for him long-term as a Lion? With all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.